What's up, y'all? It's me, the Good West Reactor, back for this video where we are going to discuss Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the 8th film in the franchise, the final installment as we know of it. And before I discuss the film and share my thoughts about it, I'd love to know what you guys thought about it in the comments below. And of course, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Doing all those good things just helps me out, and I will be getting on more videos faster because it's almost June, which means there's more movies, so I need to do more trailer reactions, all that good stuff. I also have this Mission Impossible popcorn bucket as well. I got it from my local theater. I know there's another one out there which has like the keys as well, where you can like open it up and stuff. This is the one I got that was at my local Cinemark theater. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It has all the 8 films, and it's like an octagon, right? You have the 8 sides to it. It's kind of how they made this one. All right, with that being said, how do I feel about this film? I did a quick little short discussion on this on my channel. You can go check it out. It's available. It's one of the few shorts I've made. I don't make a lot of shorts just because, you know, I like to talk a lot, you know, so I need the time to do that. But for this one, how did I feel about it? Now, contrary to popular belief, I liked this one more than part 1. All right, and I'll let you know when I'm going into spoiler territory, okay? But just before we do that, why did I like this one more? And I might do a ranking later on. If you guys want a ranking of all the films, let me know in the comments below. I might end up making one. You know, why did I like this one more than part 1? Now, here's the thing. I like action. I love action movies, you know, like good action movies, and Mission Impossible movies are filled with it, right? Now, here's the thing. The standard template for Mission Impossible movies, the first half of it, you know, is the MacGuffin part, you know, where Ethan Hunt is after something, trying to obtain something. It's central to the plot. It's the main plot device, whatever, right? He's after that. Then, towards the end is where we get all the action. How it was done this time was the entire, basically, 7th film, or a good amount of it, was focused on the MacGuffin part. Chasing after the keys, which would, you know, tell us more information about the entity and the source code, all the good stuff, right? And it's kind of saved the action for this one, where the stakes are a lot higher, you know, this is where it's all been leading up to, the build-up, the payoff happens in this one, and I prefer that portion more, which is why I like this one better. Now, is this a perfect film by any means? No, it's not. And I'll tell you my ranking at the end, so make sure to stick around for that. I think I ended up giving like a Fallout a 9 and Rogue Nation like an 8 out of 10, I believe, something like that, right? So you can kind of, you know, see from there how I'm gonna shape this one out. And Dead Reckoning, I still liked it. It's just I felt like at certain moments some of the chase sequences were kind of dragged out. A lot of unnecessary scenes were there, and you kind of feel like it didn't need to be that long. It almost was 3 hours. Whereas this one, I never felt like it was going on for too long. Maybe 1 or 2 moments, that's it, max to max. But with Dead Reckoning, alright, like, how long is this going to happen? How long are we going to do this, you know? The other movies, it's fine. They may have had repetitive moments, but they were like 2-ish hours, so I could build up with that. But with this one, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it, right? You know, and my quick notes were that this is a movie you want to watch in the theater, because when it comes home on streaming, you will like it less. All right, the story does have some issues. Get the theatrical experience makes up for that. The action, the high stakes of it all builds up for that, you know. And they're doing a lot of press and all that stuff is available. A lot of videos have been made over that, you know, marketing for the film. And the reviews for it on Rotten Tomatoes aren't too bad. The Google reviews are a bit lower, last I checked, but it's still a fun time for sure. And I would still say it's better than the second one, which is, people say, the weakest of the franchise. Again, if you want me to discuss this more in depth, I might make a ranking. So if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below. But side note from that, the first act of the film, which is being heavily criticized, does have some glaring issues. You kind of don't know where this film picks up from, because it's not entirely the ending of the last one. For example, a great example of a two-parter that I love to discuss is Infinity War and Endgame. Both great films respectively. And some people debate if Infinity War or Endgame is the better one. I don't judge. I think both films were great, in their own regard. Even Endgame, which as a finale still holds up on its own really well. This one less so though. If it was its own thing, it could have worked. Not as well, but since it's a finale, it's build up, there's elements from the first film, into this, and the third film, because again, I rewatched all the Mission Impossible movies right before this one came out. So while I was doing that, and I was watching the third one, I still didn't entirely understand what the heck was going on with the rabbit's foot. That was sort of the MacGuffin of the film, right? First two acts were all about Ethan getting the rabbit's foot, and Philip Seymour Hoffman playing the villain, I think his name was like Owen Davidson or something. What was all that about? The third act is sort of the action set pieces, right? With this one, it was kind of like that, but split in two parts, with 7 being the MacGuffin portion of the film, and 8 being the action extensive part of the film. So with that being said, you can kind of see how that ended up working out. And then this one also explained more about the rabbit's foot, what it meant, and how it sort of all comes in and ties up together, A lot of references, callbacks, Easter eggs to original films, or previous films, I should say, were there. Which was nice. I would have liked to see some characters return, like Jeremy Renner's character. I forgot who he played, but I thought he was a cool addition to the franchise. And who else? Ethan's wife, Julia. I would have liked to see both of them return. Maybe Julia could have been fine when we got her little debut in Fallout, which is still my favorite Mission Impossible film in the franchise, the best one by far, and I honestly feel like the franchise should have ended there, because I'd say the later two ones are weaker than it. Yeah, again, if you want a ranking, just let me know. I can kind of guide you as to what it's going to look like, or you can try to guess that. But with all that being said, I would definitely say that if you can sort of remember how this film, the first act, as I said earlier, was kind of weak, right? You don't entirely understand what's going on here, because if you remember the ending of Dead Reckoning, which is the first part, the 7th film, right? How it ends with Ethan sort of going on the parachute after he says, "Grace, don't worry about me, I'll be fine." And then he goes to Benji and they're both together, and Ethan's in the car and he's driving away, right? And then this one picks up, but you're not entirely sure what's going on. Immediately, there's people protesting in the streets. The gang's all back together. You're not entirely sure what's happening, though, so you're trying to figure it out. And of course, the exposition is really thrown right into your face, because there's a lot to get through, and I can understand that, right? Infinity War Endgame, however, didn't do that. Everything was natural. Everything felt right. The pacing, no issues with that. Everything was timed well. But with these two films, there was sort of a gap left behind. I'm not entirely sure. While 7 was a part 1, 8 was a part 2, the styles are just super different, There's a whole different, motive behind 7 and a different motive behind 8. I mean, the end goal is the same, to kill the entity, but the way you're thinking of it might not exactly be the same, But I'll definitely say, once the first act was over, the second and third acts were just perfection for me while I was watching The Final Reckoning in theaters, And as I said earlier, it was a great experience, just the hype of it all, and what it was going to lead up to. They definitely said the words "Final Reckoning" a lot in this film, like it's the final one, I need you to trust me one last time. So all these things were like build up moments, and you could clearly tell that it was going to be Ethan's biggest mission yet, which each film tries to be. But when you have a villain like the Entity, it's kind of hard to understand what's going on, You gotta sort of make your brain kind of think a bit like a Christopher Nolan film, Where it's like, okay, our villain just isn't some super evil bad guy, it's the Entity, And that's sort of the problem, where the Entity is kind of hard to understand, and Gabriel, our human form of the villain, isn't that interesting, Compared to Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, or Henry Cavill, or Solomon Lane, Who was Henry Cavill again? He was John Lark, I think, right? All these people were all played great, amazing villains, you know, who you could visualize. However, with Gabriel quickly being rushed, all we got in Dead Reckoning was Ethan just said that he basically made me the man who I am today. Yet, isn't Tom Cruise a bit older than the actor who plays Gabriel? But I'm not gonna get into all of that, you know. And apparently he trained him, and maybe Ethan did some bad things. I think he was arrested or something. He went to jail. Eventually, the IMF picked him up and trained him because they thought he could be useful because of his particular set of skills which he had, you know. And in Dead Reckoning, I was flashing back to this girl who died, you know, and I'm like, what's up with that? They don't really explain who she was or what that meant. All they said was whenever Ethan, you know, works with some woman, you know, she always ends up in some bad spot. First it was her, then maybe the girl from the second film died, maybe, if that's what we're led to believe. I forgot her name. I barely remember the second one. And then his wife, the whole thing happened with that, you know. So they're kind of like, you know, anytime he gets involved with some woman, you know, something bad happens. And then the same thing happened with Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust. So, you know, but they didn't really explain what happened to the first woman. I would love to know more about that. And Gabriel as a villain just didn't work for me that well. And that's kind of why Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning had some issues, you know, because I love to have a good, strong villain, and this one just didn't have that for me, you know. But as far as the action goes, it was great, you know. And I love the whole submarine portion of the film. I wanted more of that because that was one of the best scenes of Dead Reckoning. Just the first couple of minutes with the submarine was pure perfection. Yet Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, you could kind of tell he was kind of getting a bit older and appeared more tired in the film for me personally. Yet in this one, it felt like he got a shot of adrenaline or something and was way more active throughout it, which I love to see, you know. I mean, I'd say as far as his physical form goes, I think he was best in the third film and the fifth one. What was that one? Rogue Nation. Yeah. So basically that. What else was that I want to discuss with this one? Once we're in the second and third act and, you know, he's kind of going to places, you know, the team kind of splits up here. It reminds me of Fast X, you know, where our main character, Vin Diesel, and his crew kind of get separated because of what happens. And it's sort of the same thing here, because when Tom Cruise goes inside the thing to talk to the entity, he's like, all right, we gotta split up, we gotta, like, go radio silent, we can be together, you know. And how he's treating it, it's like he's playing a four-dimensional game of chess against a computer algorithm, to quote Luther's words, you know. And that brings me to my next point. I'm really sad that Luther died in this film. And another sad fact, and spoiler warning, but I'm gonna put that in the title. Someone spoiled that to me on Threads while I was on the app. I think it was because, again, I'm in the US, right? So I have to wait for the US release, which I watched it the first day it came out. The Thursday came out, I watched it, right? But other people in other countries got to see it earlier, and I'm like, come on, man. I literally saw it the first day it was available for me, and people are already spoiling it on Threads. So I'm like, yo, it's not fair, you know? Alright, what else? Oh yeah. I was talking about Luther's death scene. Yeah, he dies. When we see his body afterwards, you know. I don't understand that too well. And Tom Cruise, you know, again, I said he got separated from his crew, you know. He's trying to, you know, do his own thing, not following orders, all that jazz, you know. Again, it was great to see recurring characters return. One of them I'll get to later on. That's sort of what the first act is like. Tom Cruise eventually realizes he needs an aircraft carrier. He needs to get on the plane. And then there's whole thing about sending communication signals and figuring out where to go and doing all this stuff to be super smart. Kind of like a James Bond film-ish with, you know, other elements, but still very Mission Impossible-y, where this mission literally feels impossible. And, you know, the scenes of just, you know, showing other countries, you know, who have nuclear forces, all that sort of stuff. and how, they're losing control of all of it, the entity is winning. I thought that was just pretty interesting to see. And Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt has 72 hours to complete his mission, otherwise things will go very, very, very bad. So yeah, and of course you can definitely see with this one how I guess Christopher McQuarrie, the director of these films, the later films, was really trying to go for something with this one. The style feels a bit different at times, but I think they're trying to just get through plot points quickly so they can fill you up with as much action as possible, which may have been a complaint from the last one, because the main action sequence was the most motorcycle jump, and they literally showed a shot by shot how it was done before the film even came out, which kind of made me a bit disappointed. But with this one, it didn't happen. There were a lot of surprises in store for us, which I was glad to see. Eventually, when Tom goes into the submarine and he sees the dead bodies of the Sevastopol crew, I thought was like, damn, bro, they're actually showing us all this. Well, I love seeing things like that, the before and after, and just, these things just make me a lot more interested in the film. And, the whole thing about, the goal is to kill the entity by infecting with some sort of virus, doing all those things, and a lot of stuff happens, right? So the remaining crew, I think Benji, Grace, played by Haley Atwell, and Tarzan Davis, I forgot the character he played, they all end up going to like the Arctic, I guess, and where it was super duper cold, and when they get there, they have to sort of explain what's going on, the stakes involved, and eventually they reach this house, and when they get inside, this lady opens the door, and they're like, huh, what's going on here? And that's when we see our recurring character, the guy from the first film, like he was the sort of the spy guy who I think developed, who was stationed at Langley, right? The CIA building thing, right? That's where he was at, and it was nice to see him return. Obviously he's aged. I mean, a lot of people have, and I think so. We got him back and Kittredge back as well. Two characters both from the first film, which was great to see, of course. And eventually, though, we found out that the Russians were also there, and they wanted the team to do something for them, yet they needed to send coordinates out to Ethan Hunt so he could receive it, so he would know where they are, right? So he's doing all of that. Before that, he jumped into the water to get to the submarine. All these Russian pilots were after them as well, and a lot of crazy stuff was going on. So you could kind of see how at times this movie was feeling super big, kind of bloated. Just a lot of stuff was going on with this one. And that's kind of disappointing to hear. But you could kind of see they're trying to tie up loose ends and sort of explain what's happening next, and sort of the end game of what will happen with the entity and Gabriel and all these people. There were still a lot of chase sequences with this one, a lot of action in this one. So there was breath of fresh air. There were jokes sprinkled in at times, to make you laugh, But again, the theater experience is what this film was made for. As we push towards the third act is really when the Mission Impossible vibe of this film really picked up, where they're on a mission. I mean, it wasn't possible from the get-go, yet it's more impossible. When at the house where they were stationed at, they decided to fight back with the Russians, and it kind of didn't go too well. But no, well, there are a lot of people who were. One guy was trying to kill the president of the U.S. I forgot her name. Who was Angela Bassett playing? I don't know. She was Sloan, President Sloan. There we go. She took me a second there. Someone was trying to kill her because she was deciding not to push the button, which would probably have ruined Ethan's chances at destroying the entity. Then, of course, there was someone. People are always trying to kill Ethan, but someone was trying to stab Ethan in this one. It wasn't Gabriel; it was someone else. The Gabriel part happens later on, and then of course the Russians were trying to kill Ethan's crew, but they were able to, I guess, defeat them. But when the guy was trying to save President Sloan, I think Sidney was his name, he ended up getting shot. So it was definitely sad to see, that we are losing people in this one, because of all this stuff happening. So Officer Sidney and our goat Phineas Freak. I would have loved to explain how he got his name, because I don't think they've mentioned it. I know they mentioned it in the first one, and in Dead Reckoning, and in Final. But let me know if they mentioned it in the other ones, because I rewatched these films in a weird way. So first, I watched 4, then 5, then I went back to 1, and then I watched, and then I skipped 2, went to 3, and then 6 and 7, and then 8. I did it in such a weird way, but it's the most fun way to watch these films, because 4 is where the action really kicks in, and then the others are filled with still good films, just the backstory and the explanation kind of takes a bit to get there. But, so I kind of rewatched it in a weird way. Yeah. But I definitely understood these films a little bit better, I guess. I don't know. I skipped 2 because 2 to me is just like the weakest and really has no relevance to the film. None of the films call it back. And if it was a good film, I would have rewatched it, but it's just not a good film. Like the John Woo style. Well, John Woo is a great director. His style just doesn't match what we need from the John Wick franchise. I don't know who directed the first one. I'll have to find out, but I definitely feel like Brad Bird and McHugh both were pretty good directors for this franchise, and kind of what we needed overall. We were able to get that from the franchise. So I think that those two are pretty good directors that we ended up getting. But John Woo with the second one just feels off. The slow-mo for an action franchise. What are we doing here? Trying to be Zack Snyder or something? No, I'm kidding. But course correction from the third one was really necessary. The first one sort of explained what it would be like. Second one was a sequel, but the third one really gave the template which the others followed suit. And each one, I think really the fourth one though, really laid the foundation for 5, 6, 7, and 8. The idea of this big team, supporting Ethan. And the team kind of changed until the fourth film, really. And we got Luther and Benji being Ethan's main guys. And then Ilsa joined from the fifth one. So we built up from there. And then, as I was saying, as the second act sort of ends, Ethan it has to, I believe, get the poison pill, which Gabriel has, right? And the idea was sort of, we try to get Gabriel on our side. Before I should mention it, Haley Atwell's Grace is able to get a hold of Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt, after he jumped in the water and removed the suit. And while I was watching it with my friend, I'm like, wait, how is he not freezing? How is he fine? Like, what is going on here, And he survived. Like, what? That was sort of the main unbelievable highlight of the film for me. That certain moment. If you guys can sort of explain how the heck that happened, let me know in the comments below. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just accept it and move on, But that was just one thing I was also wondering. I'm like, huh? How? Because I think they showed us some of it in the trailer. They'll explain it in the movie, right? They have to, If they're gonna exposition dump us, why not leave something behind for that? But no. they don't give us much explanation. I looked it up online. It's just like, it's just because, you know, Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt is just goated. He's amazing. And I get to try to make it a little believable the fact that, you know, he couldn't go up and Grace had to come in and save him, but I'm like, what? Huh? And also, was there some sort of like romance that was trying to develop between Grace and Ethan Hunt? I don't understand if that was the angle, you know? Like, were we pushing that with Ilsa Faust and then with Grace? Like, I don't really understand that part. And then we found out that the guy who had been after Ethan, that agent guy, was the son of the villain from the first one. Which is, I'm like, sure, why not? Let's do a lot of references from the first film, you know? We already mentioned, I think, that Maxine's daughter was the White Widow. So sure, let's just make the first film more important than ever, even though it's a film which also has issues, yet still a classic. You know, I might get to that in a bit if I even end up making a ranking of all the films. So, you know, this whole big reunion happens, you know, with Gabriel and people from the first film. You know, Kittredge is also there, you know, and they order Ethan to stop, but of course he doesn't. Shootout breaks out, and then the timer sort of goes off for this little, like, bomb device that would cause a huge explosion, and a few people decide to go and stop it, and then Ethan's main crew goes in a separate room because Benji had been injured and they're trying to help him out. Paris and Grace are trying to save Benji from dying, so that, you know, they can stop the entity, while Ethan goes on this cool looking chase sequence, you know, where he's on the wing of an airplane, you know, and trying to stop Gabriel, you know, get the poison pill, do all those things, you know, and accomplish their mission. And in the third act, that's exactly what happens. Nobody else dies. Mission is accomplished. It's over. And I think the scenes towards the end of the film just looked visually awesome. That's all I can say, you know. Like, that part was like, alright, there's the payoff I was looking for, you know. And the film kind of wraps up from there, where the remaining team is there. They can go out on their own mission, but it's whatever. And Ethan just looks at each one by one, until eventually he walks off screen, you know. And it was sort of a really nice touch, you know. From all the missions Ethan's been doing in all the years his franchise has been around, you know. I guess that's a nice way of putting it. And right before the credit rolls, the Mission Impossible theme plays. I would have preferred it to also play during the film, but, you know, it's fine. They played it a bunch of times in Dead Reckoning. And that's about it. That's the film. I've touched about everything as I said I could. Again, I feel like as a finale, as a conclusion, it works, but as a separate entry, maybe not. There are some issues that I had, mainly the one being it's kind of bloated, the team separating, you know, but still, certain things of the film I really enjoyed, and they kind of made this one easy enough to understand, you know, after Dead Reckoning kind of had to explain to us what was going on. You know, but I think after you watch this one the first time and understand what's going on, I think the later rewatches will help. Once you kind of understand what the first act is about, then if you do a rewatch, you'll be like, okay, now I know what I'm in for. Now I'll be fine. As for a rating, I will give it a 7. Remember, I said Fallout was a 9. Ghost Protocol was an 8. And Final Reckoning, I think I said Dead Reckoning, I don't know, but Final Reckoning is a 7. And then Dead Reckoning would be right after it. But I think that's about it. I've discussed the film in about 30 minutes, so thank you for sticking around for that, as always. A ranking may come out soon, but if not, definitely expect more trailer reactions coming to the channel. I will be doing that because there are a couple of movies coming out which I would love to discuss with you at some point in time. And we'll see how everything else goes. As I wrap up the video again, please let me know what you thought of the film in the comments below. Just any certain thing, any scene, or anything with the franchise at all. You know, all these are good things that are appropriate for us to discuss as of right now. So yeah, that's about it, you guys. The Global Slash Reactor is out. Take care, you guys, and I will see you guys next time.